Welcome to Tricked Out. I'm Andrew Totolis. On this show, we take some of the most popular modifications in the sport compact world and show you what it takes to do it yourself. Today, we're working with a 2003 Dodge SRT4. Now, when the guys at Mopar put an SRT badge on a car, you know it's packing some heat. And the SRT4 is no exception. In fact, it's the best bang for your buck sport compact available. The owner has added some extra impact with some mods under the hood. But the engine appearance, it's a little suspect. So today, we're going to get in there and clean up that engine. And who knows, we might even find a little extra performance under there as well. We're going to start today's project by adding a chrome oil catch can that's going to take care of the spills at the track. Then, we're going to swap out the valve cover, plus give them a hotter coil pack and a carbon fiber fuel rail cover. I'm not stopping there. Then we're going to make a finishing plate out of aluminum to dress up his radiator supports, and to finish it all off, new hoses and hose covers so that the engine is show car ready. On a scale of 1 to 5, today's project rates a 2 on our intermediate scale. There's a little bit of fabrication with the aluminum, and we have to swap out some vital components on top of the engine. But if you're cool with that, you should have no problem with today's project. Before we get started, let's take a closer look at the project car. This 2003 Dodge SRT4 belongs to Josh Schaefer, and it's hard to miss with the screaming yellow factory paint. Matching yellow eyelids and a rolled rear bumper give a hint to this SRT's custom habit. And behind the factory alloys, drilled and slotted rotors prevent brake fade, while performance-lowering springs provide tight cornering characteristics and an aggressive stance. Inside, updated gauges show how the short-throw shifter pushes through the gears, and a turbo timer helps to make sure that the engine receives a proper cool-down after a hard run. Under the hood, the engine keeps pace with a 3-inch short ram intake pipe feeding through a high-capacity aluminum intercooler to an upgraded T3, T4 turbo. From there, the charged air runs through a 60mm throttle body into a ported intake manifold, where intake air is met with a fuel charge from the 650cc injectors inside the ported and polished head. After the bang, a tubular turbo header routes exhaust through a 3-inch custom exhaust system to the rear through a single-tip conversion exhaust. This is a fine ride indeed, but no ride is truly complete until it's been tricked out. That engine's gonna look as good as it performs when I'm done with it. Here's what you'll need for today's project. An oil catch can kit comes with hoses and mounting supplies. But for our application, we'll need to make an extra bracket using aluminum stock, a hacksaw, and a drill. And we'll use wire cutters and a file to cut and mark a new billet oil dipstick. A hotter coil pack, spark plugs and wires are going to look great and provide additional spark, while a carbon fiber fuel rail cover will clean up the fuel delivery system's appearance, and a chrome valve cover will add some shine with a fresh set of gaskets to seal it up. We'll use poster board to lay out the design for a finishing plate constructed of sheet aluminum, and polish the finishing plate with sandpaper, steel wool, polishing paste, and a metal polish. And finally, the air intake gets a heat shield wrap, and visible hoses will get covered with stainless steel braided wraps and chrome look split loom, or replaced with silicone tubing to complete the look. You can get a complete list of materials and instructions by visiting our website at DIYnetwork.com. Now, the first thing we're going to install today is a chrome oil catch can. Now, this is going to look great under the hood. Plus, it's going to keep the car running right during those hard pulls at the drag strip. Now, the can is going to splice into the crankcase ventilation line, which runs from the valve cover to the intake pipe. Under normal circumstances, this line allows excess engine pressure to go back into the engine via the intake pipe, which is good. But under hard driving conditions, oil's being slopped around all over inside the engine block, and sometimes that oil mixes with the air and it gets through the line, which is not so good, because oil in the intake can foul up the sensors and generally muck everything up inside. Now, the can is going to separate that oil out, so the only thing going to the pipe is air. Now, you can mount this anywhere under the hood near the intake pipe, but we're lucky because the battery's been moved to the trunk, so we have a great spot to mount it right here over the battery plate. Now, the can came with a bracket, but it's just too small, so we're going to create an L-shaped bracket in order to get it mounted. To begin, hold the catch can slightly above the battery tray and measure down the back of the can to the tray. Then, measure from that point to the bolt in the tray. Take these measurements to a bench and transfer them to a strip of aluminum. Then put the aluminum in a vise and cut it down to size with a hacksaw. Next, mark the mounting hole locations onto the aluminum along with the hole for the battery tray bolt. Punch the holes to keep the bit from drifting, and drill all 3 holes out with a 5/16" drill bit. After the holes are drilled, bend the aluminum to fit your application with a vise and a rubber mallet. Then finish off any rough edges gently with sandpaper, and finally, mount the bracket to the back of the can and tighten it down. Before you install the can, wrap pipe thread around the elbow fittings that are supplied with the kit. Then screw them into the can tightly and take it to the car. In this SRT4, we're going to back out the battery tray mounting bolt and use it to mount the can. Attach silicone hoses to the elbows on either side of the can and secure them with hose clamps. Then, fit the can into place and tighten it down with the original battery tray bolt. To install the hoses, pull off the original crankcase ventilation hose. Then, gauge the length to the crankcase and to the air intake and cut the silicone hoses to length. Finally, slide the hoses onto both the valve cover and the air intake pipe. Then clean off your grubby fingerprints with alcohol and a rag, and your shiny new oil catch can is ready to go. To keep the catch can clean on the inside, just check it when you check your oil. Now this one has an indicator on it so you can see how much oil you've caught. Now you can empty it when it's half full, or you can empty it out after every race. Now some people put steel wool in here as a filter, but that gets a little messy. Plus, you could get some steel wool bits in your intake, and that's not cool. I prefer to just pop it off, dump it out, put it back on, and get back to racing. All right, our next oil upgrade is to put a billet aluminum dipstick in. Now the swap is silly easy. We're just gonna take out our old dipstick, wipe it nice and clean. All right, the most important thing here is you wanna make sure that your full marks are gonna line up. Line up the stops at the handle end, then take a look at the full marks on the sticks. The new mark is about 1/4 inch off, so cut 1/4 inch off the top of the upgraded stick, then file the end and install the top. Double check that the full lines are aligned, then tighten the top with an Allen wrench and pop it in. Sweet. All right, that takes care of our oil upgrades. Next thing we're gonna hit up is the valve cover. The upgraded valve cover adds bling, and Hotter Coil Pack plugs in with the tension-grabbing wires. We'll be right back with more Tricked Out. If you're just joining in, I've been sprucing up the engine of a Dodge SRT4. I've already added some upgrades to the oil system in the form of a catch can and a billet dipstick. Now it's time to tackle some of the bigger components. The valve cover and the coil pack have done this car justice at the track and on the street. But bolder is better, right? So I'm gonna swap out the old valve cover with this new chrome one. It's gonna pop in the engine. Oh, man, that's shiny. Now, it only makes sense, since we're gonna take the valve cover off, to throw in a Hotter Coil Pack with new plugs and wires so that the SRT4 has more punch at the track. The first thing we need to do is get the old valve cover off. Start by unplugging the spark plug wires from the plugs, then unplug the coil pack. Remove the 4 bolts holding the coil pack in place and pull it out with the spark plug wires connected for reference. Next, remove the hose attached to the PCV valve and the crankcase hose on the other side of the cover. Then, working from the inside out, remove all of the bolts that hold the valve cover in place. Once all of the bolts are removed, carefully pull the cover up and off and make sure to remove the old gasket too. When you get these valve covers side by side, you can see what a big difference the new one's gonna make. Now the cool thing is you can get these powder coated in virtually any color. You can get chrome, obviously, carbon fiber, you can even pick up a clear one. Now they run about 150 bucks, so it's a quick and inexpensive way to upgrade the look of your engine. When you pick up a valve cover, you also want to make sure to get a full set of gaskets. For the SRT4, that means one for the valve cover and one for each spark plug. All right, let's get this thing started. Flip the valve cover over and push all the new gaskets into place. At the engine, place rags in the valve openings and the spark plug holes to keep them contaminant-free. Then, use a gasket scraper to clean off any old gasket gunk. Wipe the mating surface clean, then remove the rags and carefully set the upgraded valve cover into place. Use the original bolts to lock down the new valve cover. Hand tighten them first, and then snug them up, starting with the bolts closest to the center and working towards the outermost bolts on each side. After the valve cover is tightened up, replace the PCV valve hose and the crankcase ventilation hose. The upgraded coil pack is a direct replacement, so bolt it down with the original hardware. It gets bolted down counterclockwise. Since it provides a stronger spark, the plug should be replaced with a new set, specifically gapped to meet the specifications of the new coil pack. You can learn more about installing and gapping spark plugs by visiting us online at DIYnetwork.com. Once all of the spark plugs are installed, push on the upgraded plug wires, then plug in the coil, twist on the oil cap, and you're ready to go. This engine's looking pretty good. Now the next thing I'm going to install is a carbon fiber fuel rail cover. It's real easy to install. It just pops over the fuel rail like this. That looks great. You know, this valve cover already makes this engine look 100% better, But I'm not done yet. I have a few more things to do to make this engine look great. Coming up. Back to Tricked Out. I'm Andrew Tatolis. If you're in the sport compact scene, then you know us gearheads think about two things: speed and show. Now, you could build a show car, or you could build a track car, or you could do what the owner of this car is doing and go for both. This Dodge SRT4 has enough engine upgrades to make it a threat at the track, and the exterior mods have it poised to hit the show circuit. But I'm making it look even better by sprucing up the engine with some new parts and pieces. I've already put in a new oil catch can, a chrome valve cover, a new hotter coil pack, a carbon fiber fuel rail cover, and a billet dipstick. Now the next thing I'm going to do is make a finishing plate for the area between the radiator and the front lip of the car. Now you can use this technique to cover up lots of areas in your engine, but if you're going to do this, just be aware of any moving parts or any parts that control airflow, because you don't want to cover any of those up. Now the first thing we need to look at is the front bumper. The finishing plate mounts underneath the bumper cover, so you'll have to remove the cover bolts up top along with a few screws and nuts in the fender well to access the radiator support. Next, carefully pull the bumper cover off and lay it down in front of the car. Then release the lights in the front by twisting them loose and pull the cover out of the way. After the bumper cover is removed, unbolt and remove anything else that's mounted to the area that you want to cover. Then lay a piece of poster board in the desired location and trace around the contours from underneath. Mark around any bolt holes and inserts that need to be cut out, like the hood latch area. Then use scissors to cut out the template and remove the access holes using a utility knife and a piece of scrap wood to protect your work surface. After the first cuts are made, check the fit at the car and add any additional custom work before transferring the template to the aluminum. Tape the template securely to the aluminum sheet and trace around everything. Then, use a utility knife to score around each mark. In the insets, score an X in the middle to create triangles that will be easier to pop out. Then, drill out the screw holes and drill a starter hole in the center of the hood latch area to help you work the aluminum out. Once everything is scored, pop all of the scrap metal off of each edge by bending it and pulling it apart carefully. Use pliers for the insets and snap off one triangle at a time to get a clean edge. Then, use a sanding sponge on the aluminum to smooth out all the edges and take the finish plate to the car to make sure it all lines up. The finishing plate is looking good so far, and it fits, so that's good news. Now the next thing I'm going to do is polish it up to give it a nice matte finish. The polishing process is simply to scratch the metal over and over with finer and finer grit sandpaper until all the scratches have become one uniform finish. 320 grit oxide sandpaper is used first to scratch up the surface completely. Then, those scratches are replaced by rubbing 400 grit sandpaper on top. When the 400 grit has completely covered the previous finish, use even finer 600 grit paper to continue the process. Next, work the surface with a nylon scrub pad. This material is just slightly abrasive, and it will get rid of any final surface abrasions before you complete the surface prep with a 000 grade steel wool. This treatment will leave a perfectly smooth, matte surface that's ready to be polished. For the next step, work a fine polishing paste onto the entire surface. Then wipe the residue away with another clean cloth and seal the finish with liquid polish to protect it from the elements. Just treat the finishing plate with this polish whenever you clean your engine, and it'll keep the shine for years to come. When the polishing is complete, take the piece back to the car and reattach the radiator support items, like the radiator brackets, grounding strap, and hood support to hold it in place. Then, replace the bumper cover the same way it came off, tighten everything down, and admire your custom aluminum finishing plate. This engine is starting to shape up quite nicely. I really like how the valve cover and the finishing plate are adding some highlights in there. But I got a few more things to finish up. No engine beef up sport compact cars with performance and appearance upgrades. Today, I'm sprucing up the engine of an already cool Dodge SRT4. I've put in an oil catch can, a chrome valve cover, a hotter coil pack, fuel rail cover, billet dipstick, and polished finishing plate. Now take a look at the engine. It's looking mighty fine, but there's still an eyesore in there that's bugging me, and that's the intake pipe. You can go out and buy yourself a new chrome one for a couple of $100, or you can cover it with this composite heat wrap, which will instantly make it look better. And in a turbocharged car like the SRT4, it's going to insulate the pipe so you can get a cold, dense air charge. The first thing we need to do is take off the intake pipe. The hose clamp at the turbo gets removed, and 2 vacuum lines need to come off. Unplug the air temperature sensor and finally loosen the mounting bracket nut near the air filter to allow the intake to pull out. At a table, pull off the air filter, then lay the wrap along the tube. Cut a small slit for the mounting bracket to fit through, then pull the wrap tight over where the sensor hole is and cut out a hole around the grommet. You can use your utility knife to carefully tuck the fabric underneath the grommet for a professional look. Continue covering the intake with heat wrap, securing it with the attached hook and loop closure, and cutting out the access holes as you go. Then, cut off the excess wrap and secure it on each end with the supplied metallic tape. Finish up by sliding on the air filter. And then, take the intake back to the car and reinstall it, being sure to hook up all the lines and sensors correctly. Now that the intake is in and ready to go, I want to add some more red and silver in there to really tighten up the look. So, I'm going to swap out the vacuum lines with some red silicone hoses, clean up the wiring with some silver split loom, and I also picked up some braided stainless steel sheaths. Now, these are cool. You can pick up a kit of these of various sizes, and they slip over your existing hoses and make them look really tough. Now, before we begin, I need to drain the radiator. First, loosen the radiator cap. Then, open the petcock valve to drain about 1 gallon of coolant into a drip pan so the hoses on the top of the engine won't be full. Next, release the hose clamps, pull the radiator hose off the car on each end, and drain the hose into your drip pan. Take the old hose clamps off and remove any existing sleeves. Then, work the braided sleeve over the length of the hose and cut off the end. The hose clamps go back on, and then the sleeve is trimmed to the very end before the clamps are covered by end caps that slide right on. Do this on both sides, then attach the hose back to the car. The overflow hose gets the same braided steel treatment, and once the hoses are covered, you can top off the coolant. Now, for a different kind of covering, silver wire loom can be cut to size to cover many of the other lines like the air conditioning line and any others that are visible on the top layer of the engine that need to be covered to complete the look. Next, to add touches of red, silicone tubing is measured, cut to length, and then added to replace the existing vacuum lines. Man, this engine is miles above the way it used to look. It's amazing this kind of change can happen with a little bit of knowledge and some well-designed parts. Now, I'm going to tidy some things up, and while I do that, check out the cost of today's project. The oil catch can runs $90 and the chrome valve cover is $190. The fuel rail cover is $100 and the billet dipstick costs $40. A hotter coil pack runs $65 and plugs and wires are $100. The finishing plate aluminum is $15 and the polishing supplies are $25. The intake wrap costs $70. The silicone hoses were $40, as were the braided lines, and the wire loom will only run $20. The total for today's project is $795. That's great for what we accomplished today. And by installing the parts ourselves, we saved about $350. Now, there's one more thing to do before we close up the shop today, and let's take a look at the results. Before our mods, this SRT4 had tons of power and exterior punch, but its underhood beauty left much to be desired. Now, with the new additions we made, beauty and function come together. The functional yet stylish oil catch can and air intake will help with the performance, and the upgraded valve cover and silicone lines are just the right touches to help the car score highly at shows. The additions of the braided lines and split loom bring it all together with the silver flash needed to set off the valve cover, and the finishing plate and the fuel rail cover complete the look. Don't forget, you can get a complete breakdown of all the projects you see here on Tricked Out by visiting us at our website at DIYnetwork.com. Now, this looks great for just a day's worth of install time. For all of us here at Tricked Out, thanks for hanging with us. We'll see you next time.